After weeks of intense clashes, Pakistan and India have stepped back from the brink, but the aftermath is still unfolding. Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir has called Operation Bunyanam Marsus a defining moment in the country's military history. During a visit to injured soldiers in Rawalpindi, he praised their courage and said the army's response showed unity and strength. The military says this entire period, from the Pahalgam attack on April 22 up until May 10, will now be remembered as Marka-i-Haq, worth the righteous battle. Pakistan says it launched the operation to retaliate against Indian airstrikes that killed civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has announced that May 10 will be marked every year as Yawm-e Marka-i-Haq, a day to honor the country's military response. This coming Friday, May 16, will also be observed nationwide with special prayers and tributes to the armed forces. The government is rolling out compensation packages too. Families of martyred civilians will get 10 million rupees. For military martyrs, the compensation ranges from 10 to 18 million rupees, plus housing and continued salaries. Their children will get free education up to graduation, and daughters will receive a marriage grant. Those injured in service will receive between 2 to 5 million rupees, and the government will rebuild mosques and homes damaged during the conflict. Pakistan's parliament is also standing united. Lawmakers passed a resolution praising the armed forces for their professionalism and restraint. They paid tribute to the martyrs and called the response to India's aggression both measured and dignified. But across the border, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is sending a different message. In his first speech since the escalation, he made it clear that India has only paused military action, not stopped it.
और मैं फिर दोहरा रहा हूं, हमने पाकिस्तान के आतंकी और सैन्य ठिकानों पर अपनी जवाबी कार्रवाई को अभी सिर्फ स्थगित किया है.
He repeated India's decision to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty, something Pakistan says is a violation of international agreements.
टेरर और ट्रेड एक साथ नहीं चल सकते और पानी और खून भी एक साथ नहीं बह सकता.
Back in Pakistan, former Information Minister Fawad Chaudhry slammed Modi's remarks, calling them hollow and full of political spin. He said there's still no clarity from India on the attackers behind the Pahalgam incident, and no accountability. Meanwhile, a quiet but significant diplomatic step took place behind the scenes. The military operations chiefs of India and Pakistan spoke by phone on Monday. For the first time in days, there were no reports of explosions or cross-border fire overnight. The Indian Army described it as the first peaceful night along the border in weeks. According to Indian media, the discussion focused on the ceasefire and confirmed that trade and border restrictions remain in place for now. The Indian side says more details will be shared soon. While the ceasefire has held so far, global powers aren't taking any chances. U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters his administration prevented a bad nuclear war, saying millions of lives were at stake. He also warned both countries that future trade was off the table if they didn't de-escalate.
Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have, and they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India.
Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong welcomed the ceasefire in a call with Pakistan's Deputy PM Ishaq Dar, expressing condolences for civilian casualties, including those from the Jafar Express attack. Dar stressed that Pakistan had acted strictly in self-defense, in line with UN principles and international law. Meanwhile, China also welcomed the development. Spokesperson Lin Jian said the ceasefire serves the long-term interests of both nations and benefits regional stability. China confirmed that Foreign Minister Wang Yi had spoken separately to Ishaq Dar and Indian NSA Ajit Doval, urging continued restraint and a lasting ceasefire. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, called the ceasefire a positive step, but urged renewed international focus on resolving Kashmir through peaceful dialogue and UN resolutions. The group condemned strikes on Pakistani and Kashmiri territories, and called for protection of civilians and places of worship, reiterating its stance on respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy also joined the diplomatic chorus. After speaking with FM Ishaq Dar, both sides agreed to maintain close coordination, with Lamy reportedly praising Pakistan's efforts to uphold regional peace. As diplomacy accelerated, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with the UK Foreign Secretary, discussing the need for both India and Pakistan to maintain open lines of communication and fully uphold the ceasefire. Rubio repeated U.S. support for direct dialogue between the two countries and stressed the importance of avoiding further escalation. So while the guns have fallen silent, for now, peace is still fragile, and the road ahead will depend on what both countries do next. In a rare moment of breakthrough amid ongoing bloodshed, Hamas has confirmed the release of Israeli-American captive 𝐒𝐭𝐤𝐬, citing it as part of broader efforts to secure a ceasefire. The Palestinian group said the move followed important contacts with the U.S. administration, describing its approach as one of positivity and high flexibility. In a statement, Hamas called on Washington to intensify efforts to end what it described as a brutal war waged by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against civilians in Gaza. The Red Cross facilitated the handover of Alexander inside Gaza and transferred him to Israeli forces via the Ceasefire crossing. He is now en route to the Re'im Air Base, where he will reunite with his mother before being flown to a hospital near Tel Aviv. The highly choreographed process mirrors past arrangements for released Israeli captives. U.S. President Donald Trump had announced Alexander's impending release hours earlier, crediting his special envoy Steve Witkoff for brokering the deal. He is going to be released in about 2 hours, Trump said, later qualifying, or at some time today, let's say.
And third, I'm very happy to announce that Idan Alexander, an American citizen who, until recently, most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released in about 2 hours, actually. And he's going to be released before the eyes of Steve Witkoff, who has done a fantastic job. I know a lot of people that have a lot of talent. I know Steve had a lot of talent. But I know a lot of people with a lot of talent, but there's one that I thought had a special way about him, special personality. Aside from being a good deal maker, had a special way about him, and it was Steve. Knew very little about the subject matter, who does? But he learned it in about 2 hours, and he's been fantastic. So I want to just thank Steve. But they're going to be releasing Idan in about 2 hours from now, or sometime today, let's say. And again, they thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy.
This development unfolds amid mounting international pressure and a spiraling humanitarian crisis in Gaza. According to Prime Minister Netanyahu's office, military operations in Gaza will continue. A new report by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification has warned that Gaza's entire population is facing a critical risk of famine. At least 500,000 people are already starving. This follows Gaza's own report last week that 57 people, mostly children, have died of hunger since Israel imposed a total blockade on March 2nd. Authorities in Gaza say food is being used as a weapon of war, and have called on the international community to pressure Israel to lift the blockade. Gaza's health ministry says hospitals are in total disarray, operating without surgical tools, X-ray or anesthesia machines, and even basic supplies like medical gas and bed sheets. Staff are reportedly working around the clock under impossible conditions, with no resources to maintain hygiene or perform safe surgeries. In Europe, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest, has sold its shares in Pause Retail and Energy, citing the company's supply of fuel to illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. This marks the second divestment linked to Israeli operations in the occupied territories, as calls intensify in Norway to fully sever ties with companies linked to Israel. At the same time, Israel is pushing back legally. It has formally asked the International Criminal Court to withdraw arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and his former defense minister. The warrants, issued last November, accuse them of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Israel is also seeking to pause the ICC's ongoing investigation, arguing that the court lacks jurisdiction. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has agreed to hold direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Turkey on Thursday, following a public push by U.S. President Donald Trump. Putin proposed the meeting after rejecting calls from Ukraine and European leaders for a 30-day ceasefire. Trump urged Kyiv to accept the offer without delay, saying it could be a turning point. Zelensky posted, "I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey. Personally, However, the Kremlin has yet to confirm whether Putin will attend in person. Meanwhile, Trump hinted he might join the meeting, saying he was thinking about flying over if he believes peace progress is possible.
And it is taking place. And I think you may have a good result out of the Thursday meeting in Turkey between Russia and Ukraine. And I believe the two leaders were going to be there. I was thinking about flying over. I don't know where I'm going to be on Thursday. I've got so many meetings. But I was thinking about actually flying over there. There's a possibility of it, I guess, if I think things can happen. But we got to get it done. We got to save 5,000 lives a week.
The proposed summit would mark the first direct Russia-Ukraine talks since 2022. Ukraine insists a ceasefire must begin first, while Moscow wants negotiations to reflect current battlefield realities. Nonetheless, tensions between Russia and Ukraine continue to escalate, with no pause in the fighting. Ukraine reported that Russia launched more than 100 drones overnight, of which 55 were intercepted by air defenses. The attacks caused notable damage in the Odessa and Donetsk regions, injuring one person and hitting key railway infrastructure. Despite a 30-day ceasefire proposal from Kyiv, backed by several European allies, former British Home Secretary Charles Clarke criticized Donald Trump's ceasefire proposal, which suggested Ukraine cede Crimea to Russia without security guarantees. Clarke likened Trump's approach to his failed North Korea diplomacy and emphasized that Ukraine could never legally concede Crimea. Meanwhile, European leaders continue to support a ceasefire plan with no territorial concessions. With Russian military progress slowing, questions are mounting about Europe's commitment to Ukraine's security, especially with fears of a potential U.S. withdrawal. Both Clarke and geopolitical expert Brendan Sims argue Russia's military strength has been overstated, citing the failure to take Kyiv in 2022 and its losses in the Black Sea. In Poland, relations with Russia have worsened following a major fire in a Warsaw shopping center, which Polish authorities have accused Russian secret services of orchestrating. Moscow denies the allegations, but Poland has responded by summoning the Russian ambassador and announcing the closure of the Russian consulate in Krakow, citing increasing acts of sabotage and disinformation targeting Poland. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, President Zelensky held a significant phone conversation with newly elected Pope Leo XIV. The conversation centered on the ongoing abduction of Ukrainian children by Russia, a growing international concern. Zelensky also extended an invitation for the Pope to visit Ukraine, underscoring Ukraine's efforts to garner global support in the face of continued aggression. As the conflict rages, Europe, Poland, and the Vatican remain deeply engaged in the geopolitical landscape surrounding the war.